who are they, who were they before this diagnosis in order to help sustain that identity, that core person that they have always been. The diagnosis doesn't take it away, but often people are so focused on the diagnoses, on the treatment, on the end of life that they forget that this is a human person with a personality and beliefs and experiences and preferences. And it's so important that for me to honor what the person wants.
How can we have more compassion for what people are going through? This is not just for the hospice world or end of life or healthcare. Anyone listening, this is for any part of your life where you are interacting with another human being. Welcome to Hospice Redefined. This is the podcast where we uncover the true purpose of hospice care and empower caregivers, families, and healthcare professionals with practical tools, compassionate support, and valuable insights. Let's face it, hospice is often misunderstood. It's viewed as an ending or a sign of giving up. But in reality, hospice is about life, living with dignity, comfort, and meaningful connection during one of life's most profound transitions. I'm your host, Rachel Carta, a registered nurse with experience in hospice care, alongside of an incredible team of hospice professionals. We're here to shift the narrative and provide support to the caregivers who are really in the trenches. Whether you're one of those caregivers, a healthcare professional, or someone curious, or even if you're uncertain about hospice, this is the podcast for you. Let's redefine hospice care together, one conversation at a time. Welcome to another episode of Hospice Redefined. I'm your host, Rachel Carta, a registered hospice nurse. Today's conversation feels so important to me because when we're caring for someone who is seriously ill or at the end of life, there's so much more happening under the surface than what we can see. Many of the people we care for, and honestly, many of us too, have lived through experiences that have left an invisible mark. These experiences can deeply shape the way someone responds to being ill, to accepting the help that they so desperately need, or even just being in this vulnerable place of being sick. That's why today we're diving into the idea of trauma-informed care. What does this really mean? Why does it matter so much in hospice and caregiving in general? And how small shifts in the way that we show up as caregivers, as nurses, as staff, this can make a world of difference for the people that we're walking alongside. So because of this topic being of so importance, I'm so excited and honored to be joined by Kate Zuraw, who has over a decade of social work experience across the medical, psychiatric, and community sessions. Her work has focused on trauma-informed care, crisis intervention, complex case management, and advocating for social determinants of health. She's led programs, supervised clinical teams, developed training curricula, and worked to ensure compliance with human rights and healthcare standards. Her passion lies in creating accessible, person-centered support that fosters long-term resilience. Welcome to the episode, and thank you so much for being here, Kate.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, we really need your expertise on this one, and I'm excited to dive in. When you hear the word trauma-informed care, some of our listeners might be wondering, what does trauma even mean? Can you define trauma in a simple way for us to understand?
Trauma is a distressing experience that can feel overwhelming or unsafe or threatens a person's sense of safety or control or security. It often overwhelms a person's ability to cope or understand what's even happening in that moment of that experience.
Thank you so much for sharing that. What I heard is this overwhelming experience. I know in the world of trauma, some people are talking about bigger traumas or smaller traumas. In my research, I have realized that whether it's big or small, it has an impact on the person.
Yes. Trauma is it's a whole body experience. So it not only happens to our outside world, our life experience, but it's something that lives in our body, lives in our brain. It can actually change the way the brain develops or forms depending on how early in life the trauma happened or how prolonged the trauma is. It's an actual scar on the brain at times. So when we think about people who are survivors of trauma, it's actually a physiological experience. And
Mm.
it's the trauma is living in your body. So as you're going about your day-to-day life, it's an ever-present sensation that you have that sometimes is beneath the surface and other times rises up and is very present and often can get in the way of day-to-day life.
That's so helpful to understand it like that. And what I heard you say was that it lives inside the body, and
Mhm.
sometimes it's on the surface and it's guiding our decisions, our the way we talk, the way we interact with people. And then sometimes it's kind of under the surface, maybe in a more subconscious way, driving the bus, if you will.
Yeah.
And I also heard you say that it's not just an experience, but it's something that has made an imprint on the brain in a
Mhm.
way that is physiological. So
Yeah.
what that means is for listeners that it's something that has literally changed the structure of the brain, which means when you were talking about that, I was thinking that some people, that really don't understand this might say, well, why can't you just get over it?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
maybe it's even someone who's been in therapy for a long time and why is this not getting better? And
Mhm.
when you talk about it like this change of brain structure, it's not so simple.
No.
And it's not something that you kind of do 12 therapy sessions and now you're good to go, right? It's something that shows up. Now, I think it would be helpful when we think about trauma. People might be thinking of really big things like abuse of any kind or
Mhm.
neglect or witnessing a terrible accident. There's also other ways people experience trauma.
Trauma is such a big spectrum of experiences. And the interesting thing about trauma is that two people can experience the exact same event and have different reactions to it. Some people are traumatized by that, and other people are just like, well, that was a terrible day and able to go about their lives. And there's amazing research about why that might be. But for the purposes of your question, let me focus in more on those events that could impact people. I see a lot of people who have been in a car accident, for example, and that feels so commonplace every day. So many people either have or know somebody who've been in a car accident, and that can be a very traumatic event for people. Other times it's getting a particular medical diagnosis that can cause them to feel out of control, that they're overwhelmed by things like that. The death of a loved one can be very traumatic. Things that disrupt your day-to-day life. So moving can sometimes be a trauma for people. Sometimes it's a great experience, other times it can be traumatic. Same with changing jobs, especially if the previous job you left was if you got fired, for example, anything that changes your life. So it could be getting married, getting divorced, having a baby. Gosh, the list is endless, and then it goes into the bigger areas of life, such as the abuse, as you mentioned. Neglect is also a big one, and abuse can be verbal, can be physical. So it can just be a person in your life that's constantly being mean to you, belittling you, making you feel less than. All of that can be trauma.
Thank you for that explanation. It's so helpful. What I heard under that is that you go through an experience that is overwhelming in
Mhm.
some way, and there's a life change that's happening potentially, and
Yes.
it leaves an imprint on the system.
Hmm.
We want to really acknowledge that while something, you said this, it may, two people can experience the same thing. And so this is where we have to, as loved ones, caregivers, professionals, really have compassion for people's experiences.
Yeah.
Because when you see, I often will see a reaction to
Mhm.
something from someone else, and this reaction feels really out of proportion
Sure.
to what's going on.
Hmm.
And for me, after studying this and learning this, I know that that could be based in an overwhelming experience that they had at some point in life,
Hmm.
or that's an ongoing thing. And so this reaction doesn't really match up to what
Hmm.
is going on. And so I appreciate that explanation because I think it helps us understand more of what people are going through and that we can have more compassion because I just spoiler alert, that's what this whole podcast is about, right? How can we have more compassion for what people are going through?
Yeah.
Okay. And this is not just for the hospice world or end of life or healthcare. Anyone listening, this is for anyone. And this is for any part of your life where you are
Hmm.
interacting with another human being. Okay. Because we are human beings living an experience that can be difficult and overwhelming. That is the human experience, right? We'd love to say you could just sail through stuff, but that's not really what life is. And so I really appreciate this discussion on what trauma really means and how it can show up. And let's talk now about what trauma-informed care can look like. Okay. So when we think about caregiving, maybe it's your family that you're caregiving for, or
Mhm.
maybe you're in the role of a nurse or a social worker or a chaplain or a home health aide. These are
Mhm.
all service providers for people that are struggling. And while we will get a little deep into why it could be different at end of life, but we want to think about even anybody who's had a medical diagnosis. You mentioned that as being a trauma. You're going along with your life. Everything feels this is what life is. I go to work, I do my thing. And now suddenly you have this diagnosis
Mhm.
that is terminal and terrible and
Mhm.
may come with treatment. I also really believe that the treatments are often trauma in themselves,
For
not
sure.
not just mentally, but also what's happening inside your body.
Mhm.
We have such a wonderful medical system that's working to help fix what's wrong, but in the process, there can be a lot that is torn down in the process, if that
Yeah,
makes sense.
absolutely.
So help us, Kate, understand what trauma-informed care means,
Mhm.
especially when we're walking alongside of someone who's got one of these terminal diagnoses, and what could it look like in a real moment?
That's a great question. I personally operate from the belief that or the assumption that every person I interact with has had some kind of trauma. Trauma is a fact of life, and it's just easier to kind of be a blanketly compassionate person, as you were saying, and just assume that the other person has because it's safer to assume that they have than they haven't. When you're thinking about trauma informed care specifically, it's understanding how the past experiences change how a person currently behaves or how they see the world around them. So, our responsibility is to understand that and then create an environment that prioritizes being a trustworthy person for them, having safety, having choice, collaborating with them, empowering them, as opposed to just talking at them or telling them what to do. And I often start very simply with just figuring out what is going well, what is a strength of theirs, what's a skill that they have. And in thinking about people with medical conditions or end of life, who who are they, who were they before this diagnosis in order to help sustain that identity, that core person that they have always been. The diagnosis doesn't take it away, but often people are so focused on the diagnoses, on the treatment, on the end of life that they forget that this is a human person with a personality and beliefs and experiences and preferences. And it's so important that for me to honor what the person wants, how they want their end of life to be, or how they want to get through the treatment. And that for me is often pausing and offering choice about what it is that they want, what's going to be preferable to them, how they can be most comfortable, and really just naming, especially in hospice care, is that, a person has taken care of themselves for so long, and now they might be dependent on their family, caregivers, and just naming that it's such a hard transition for them.
Listeners, you can't see me because this is audio, but I'm shaking my head. I'm writing notes down furiously because everything Kate just shared, I hope that you rewind and listen to it again, probably 5 times at least, because everything she just said is everything in compassionate care. And
Mhm.
I can say that you talked about providing as a provider or a caregiver, you're providing an environment of safety and collaboration. I
Yes.
love that so much because that also lends to choice, as you
Yeah.
said. The other thing that really stuck out to me was when you talked about just because someone's sick or dying doesn't mean they are a different person.
Mhm.
Okay. And often, I think because of, and this is just my conjecture, because of the way the Western world views end of
Mm.
life and death,
Yes.
often family members are scared to come
Yeah.
around the loved one.
Hmm.
They often have, and this is another topic, but their own their own traumas coming up, maybe reminders of what this sick person is maybe bringing up, another difficult circumstance, and remembering who someone is
Mm,
is vital to connecting to their identity. And one of the things I always do when I am interacting with my patients, what did you do before all of this? What
mhm,
did you love to do? What and I'm in their homes, which is very cool because I can see
mm.
what they love. I
Yeah.
can see the pictures on the walls. I can see, and right now as I'm talking, I'm having all these flashes of like different experiences and how rich they are, and how as I walk into the homes, it's not a job, it's a time of interaction and collaboration. And I think that people trust you more as a caregiver and a provider when you see who they are.
Mhm.
And also, I want to add one element to that, and that is oftentimes the symptoms that get when you're getting closer to end of life can really change a person's personality. And that can be really, really hard for family members. Okay, I went through that with my own dad. It was excruciating. And someone in my life kept reminding me this isn't who he always was.
Mhm.
Remember who he was, remember who he was. And that was so important to me.
Mhm.
Try not to cry right now, right? It was so important to me to remember. And so as we can share with the family members, tell me what your dad used to be like. Tell me the things he used to love to do. And when you do that for family members, their faces light up. And all of a sudden, the heaviness of death is lifted for a moment. It's
Mhm.
profound. It's profound. So thank you for telling us that trauma-informed care can really be about providing safety, collaboration, giving the patient choice. I love how you said you focus on what's going well. What
Mhm.
are their strengths? Like, what can they still do? Right?
Right.
What are they still able to, what are they still interested in? And what do they want? What do they
Yes.
want? Right? Just because someone is ill doesn't mean that all of their hopes and dreams disappear in that moment. They're carrying all of this, great,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
And you also said it's important to name this loss of independence.
Yeah.
And that's something that I always do also. And that is, this must be so hard that you can no longer do the things you used to do. And if you're living in a normal, healthy body, you might not realize that when someone is really sick, the really basic things like getting a shower, going to the restroom, eating food, right? Like these are
Mhm.
things we take for granted. A lot of our patients can no longer do those things without help.
Right.
And so naming that it's hard to lose that, the patient, I can see in moments that there's like a burden lifted when they're able to name how hard it actually is.
Yeah.
And I think they're also able to accept a bit more help when you're able to name this. Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for sharing all that. And I wanted to just go back to it because I think it was so important. Sometimes, as people who are taking care of someone who is ill, we see a resistance to care.
Mm.
A word that I absolutely hate in the healthcare is non-compliance. I hate
Yeah.
that word so much. When I see it in
Same.
charts, I want to rip them up. Okay.
Mhm.
Because if I see that word non-compliance, it's always a signal to me that there's more going on here.
Mm.
Okay.
Mhm.
And so I would love for you to talk with us about how when we see something like resistance or this awful phrase, non-compliance,
Mm. Mhm.
how might that actually be a trauma response?
Yeah. Yeah. This is a soapbox of mine, so you
Oh,
might have to
good.
rein me in
Good.
at some
Okay,
point.
go, go, go.
My struggle with those words is a person is resisting and non-complying with something that I, as the professional, are putting on them to do. So it's my imposing my will onto them and saying, oh, the person's not doing what I told them to do. And regardless of my knowledge and expertise, it's still that person's life, and they still have choice. They still have the ability to live the life that they want to. And oftentimes, when people have experienced trauma or just, I mean, like I said, I think most people have, but in general, people have adapted how they live their lives as a response to the events in their life. So they can sometimes seem reactive or incongruent, like you're saying before, with what's going on around them, but it's just how their body, their nervous system, their habits, how they've adapted to things that have happened in their life. And part of that is wanting a sense of control. All of us as humans want some control over our lives. And when we're end of life, we're in bed, we're being taken care of, we have almost no control left in our lives. And so saying, no, I'm not going to take that medication or no, I'm not going to do that treatment is the one place that a person can execute control over their lives. And that's why it's so important to have compassion and to talk to people about both why we're doing certain things, why it's important to do certain things, and giving them choice in when it's happening, what's happening. So that way we're giving the person dignity and a voice in their lives because that's so important at every stage of life to allow them to have say over what happens to them. And if a person is being resistant, there's often a really good reason why they're not wanting to do what they're doing. And being curious with them and asking them questions about what their hesitation is, why they don't want to do it. Oftentimes, people either have a really legitimate and good reason that they can tell you and you can talk through, or that helps break down this just automatic no because they're feeling so out of control. And it's important as professionals, as caregivers, as family members, just to be curious, be compassionate, and have conversations and not just lead with frustration that somebody's not doing what they're supposed to do. And with family members, they often want what's best for their loved ones. And so they're wanting to give the medication or do the thing that they were told they have to do. And for them, that adds a level of frustration because they're trying to do everything possible. And so, as professionals, when I'm talking to their loved ones, their family members, just reminding them that they are doing the best they can and to make sure that I'm both giving compassion to the family members as I am with the patient, because that's how everything's going to run smoothly if everybody's on the same page with that compassion and that belief that resistance is there for a really good reason.
Wow, Kate, so much to unpack there and so much to dig into because at the end there, you said something that was so important. That was when everybody's on the same page, that's when things run more smoothly.
Mhm.
And we do see that in the homes where the patient is holding their ground for, like you said, a very good reason. And the family members are really frustrated. Why won't they take this med? They know they need it. And
Mhm.
so that level of, I also feel like that level of resistance between the caregiver and the patient also really robs the the beauty that can be living in at this time
Yes.
because we're not able to really enjoy and spend time with our loved one because we're so mad that they won't take their pills,
Yes,
right? And I
exactly.
know I'm kind of simplifying things, but I just know it because I've lived it and
Mhm.
I've seen it in home after home after home.
Yeah.
What you said is that we can be more curious because that resistance is here for a very good reason. Okay.
Yes.
And even something like sometimes our patients are really resistant to allow us to order a hospital bed. Okay.
Mm.
And when you get more curious about that, I might say, tell me more about what that might mean if there's a hospital bed here. Right.
Yes.
And this is a really obvious one because they see the hospital bed as I'm going to go in that bed and I'm never going to come out again. That's where
Yeah.
I'm going to die. I'm not ready to die.
Mhm.
But by having that conversation, you can open the door to what they're feeling about the whole process of end of life, right? I
Exactly.
I can very vividly remember a patient who he was getting weaker and I needed to order a walker for him to get around more safely. And he would not, he was very resistant and he was falling and he was having such a hard time. And this was when I was very early in my hospice nursing. And I remember just asking him, when you see this walker, what comes up for you?
Mm.
And then he started talking about how his whole life he was this construction guy and he did all this construction work and he used all this heavy machinery and what do I need now this crutch to be able to get around? And so we really had this really wonderful conversation about the life that he used to live
Mhm.
and we were able to reframe what this walker could mean.
Mhm.
Maybe now it's no longer a crutch, but it's how I can get to the bathroom safely so I can live in a safer way. And it
Mhm.
wasn't easy. It didn't happen overnight. It's so important to explain that what we're asking someone to do, whether it's take a medication, whether it's ordering hospital equipment, because these are the two things that we see the most quote resistance. I'm putting air quotes around that.
Please do.
Towards, okay? Yeah. And you said if we can explain what we're trying to do, why it's important, and how we're trying to help them, and if you can do it from a place of curiosity and compassion, not
Mhm.
I'm the professional and I think
Mhm.
you should have this, and if you
Mhm.
don't have this, you're going to fall down the steps. Like
Mhm.
it's a completely different thing to say, what if we give this a shot
Mhm.
and let's see if you're more comfortable this way? That just happened this week. One of my patients didn't want to take pain medication. And
Yeah.
she shared with me that she's used to tolerating pain. As a woman, she's
Hmm.
used to tolerating pain. Again, another topic for another day.
For sure.
And I said, let's just give this a shot and see how you feel. Let's try this and just see. And she was willing to give it a shot because I wasn't saying
Hmm.
my job to make sure that you're treated. Medical providers are very trained. You have to follow a certain criteria of what needs to be done when, right?
Hmm.
And sometimes those rules have to go out the window because
Yeah.
we have to meet people where they are. I also love how you said, oftentimes when we're giving these suggestions or directives, that we're imposing our will on their life. And even though we
Hmm.
are trying to help, these are safety things, these are comfort measures, it's still our will. And being able to get the loved one on board with it will make everything run more smoothly. You said that. I wanted to highlight that. One thing, let's go back to this idea that as humans, we crave a sense of control.
Yes.
When I was a nursing student, my first patient that I ever took care of. She was bedbound. She had a wound in her back the size of a baseball.
Oh,
Okay. She had been bedbound for, oh my goodness, I think she said 15 years.
wow.
And I remember this so vividly that she wanted her blankets a certain way. She
Mhm.
wanted them pulled up, and every way I did it was wrong.
Mhm.
And she kept saying, nope, this way, this way, this way. And I can remember in that moment, my partner was really frustrated and thought she was just a pain in the neck type of a
Mhm.
patient. But I
Yeah.
remember in that moment thinking something's going on for her, and this is
Mhm.
all she has left to control.
Yes.
Can't control how she's fed. She can't control how she's going to the bathroom. She can't control getting up out of this bed. She can't even control what she's watching on TV because her body doesn't work.
Hmm.
But she can tell me how to make her blanket
Hmm.
a certain way. And I highlight that story because you will see this if you're blessed enough to take care of someone who is ill. You will see behaviors like this because again, it's a human need to control. And when we
Hmm.
feel out of control, let me let you finish that sentence if you'd like, Kate. What happens when we as humans feel out of control? What do we do?
We try and find a way to gain control back, and sometimes it's in very aggressive and problematic and upsetting to those around us ways. It's a fundamental need, in my opinion, that we need to have control over something in our lives. And we work hard to take control wherever we can and hold on to it as tightly as we can, especially when the options are limited. So that blanket story is just a perfect example of you're exactly right, in my opinion. That's what the woman had control over, is making sure the blankets were exactly how she wanted them to be, to bring her a sense of comfort or familiarity, or yeah, that sense of control over one thing in her life. It's such a beautiful example.
Yeah, and when you talk about that, we as caregivers and professionals, we could help someone have control in
Mm.
such easy ways.
Yes.
Instead of saying, okay, we're having for lunch chili or chili, we could say, would you like chili or a turkey sandwich?
Hmm.
They're really
Yeah,
random food
exactly.
choices that just came in my mind. But
Love it.
we could give choice of, do you want to get your bath at 9 or 10?
Hmm.
We can be less rigid as caregivers
Yeah.
by giving choice in a small way. Would you like to have a sip of orange juice or water?
Mhm.
That way there is that little bit of control in choice.
Yeah,
When we can do that, we can offer that. And if we offer that, how compassionate is that?
very. That's
And
so.
how curious, right? How curious do we get to
Hmm.
be creative. And how can I give this person control? How can
Hmm.
I do that in a small way so that they feel that they're maintaining their autonomy?
Yes.
We learn that word as healthcare providers, autonomy, that we're supposed to be giving people autonomy. And
Hmm.
yet then we also have words like resistance and noncompliance. That doesn't even go together, does it?
Such a contrary.
Completely, completely. Thank you for helping us navigate this. And to recap, we're slowing down, we're
Hmm.
offering choice. We're noticing that something small for this patient, for this loved one, can really give them back dignity.
Hmm.
And that's so important.
Yes.
How can we all be more trauma aware? And I know we talked about this already in the conversation. If someone's listening and thinking, this makes so much sense, where can I start? And we did
Hmm.
talk about this through the whole conversation, but let's recap.
Yeah.
What are simple ways loved ones, nurses, CNA, social workers, how can we bring trauma awareness and
Hmm.
safety
Mm.
into how we care for others?
Yeah, I think we did a great job peppering in little tidbits throughout the conversation and just thinking about how to be compassionate, how to give choice, how to not assume the worst in the person that we're caring for, that there's a good reason why they're saying what they're saying, acting how they're acting, and just allowing a person to be their individual selves throughout the entire process and getting to know what that is. And on the flip side of that, something that I think is really important to be a trauma aware professional or even caregiver, loved one, family member is to focus on ourselves, funnily enough. Um, because what we can control for sure is ourselves and how we show up in that moment with that loved one, and giving yourself permission to just pause, take a breath before entering the room, before entering the house, before leaving your car if you're coming to that person's house, and just make sure that you're okay, because your presence with that person who's passing, they'll be able to pick up on if you're not okay, and that's going to make things so much worse. And when you're feeling okay, you're feeling regulated, that's when you're able to be calm, not rush through tasks, be more confident in how you're giving the service, being able to narrate what you're doing, why you're doing it, giving them that choice, being curious with them, and able to be present with the person and not take it personal if they are having a bad day, because they're going to have bad days. And you're able to notice that they're having a bad day and it has nothing to do with you, and you're not taking it personal as that caregiver, as that loved one, and supporting the person compassionately and curiously about what's going on and seeing what we can do to support them through that bad day, that good day, that those moments of their lives.
Really important remarks, Kate. What I heard under all of that was that our own self-care
Hmm.
allows us to show up as compassionate and curious providers of a really amazing service.
Yes.
And our self-care as caregivers really really goes down because we're so focused on taking care of other people that it can feel selfish to
Hmm.
do the things we need to do for self-care. That's why if you go to hospiceredefined.com/checklist, you'll see a caregiver self-care checklist
Oh, I love that.
because, and we want to give that to you as a free gift because it's something so basic you can print it and put it on your refrigerator. And what it's doing is just reminding you of small ways that you can take care of yourself.
Hmm.
Because you said we could pause before we go into the home. Or if you're in living with the person, you could pause before you go into the living room where they are or into their bedroom and make sure that you're okay.
Hmm.
And you may not be quote, air quotes again, okay, because what you're going through is really, really, really hard,
Yeah.
but that you can be in a place of, am I calm? Am I
Hmm.
curious? Am I compassionate? And if you're not those things, maybe taking a few deep breaths and just thinking of those words
Hmm.
will allow you to kind of be that.
Hmm.
We're not asking you to be perfect, okay? There's going
Not
to
at
be
all.
days where your loved one is going to drive you crazy, okay?
Hmm.
And there's going to be days where you feel like you cannot even get up off the couch because this job of caregiving is so incredibly hard.
So hard.
Please listen to episode 3 also, where I go over some self-care tips that you can do as a caregiver. And that this goes to professionals also, because we're notorious for not taking care of ourselves, right, Kate?
Oh, yeah.
And so as you take care of yourself, you're able to be present. You also said that. So you can really help people maintain their identity and their dignity. One quick thing I wanted to highlight. You said that when we're in this place, we cannot assume the worst of
Mhm.
someone. Okay. We won't take it personally if they're having a bad day. Quick story to highlight that. Working in the hospital, I had a patient that was in end stage liver failure,
Mhm.
and she had lived a very hard life, and she was only in her 50s, and
Yeah.
she, had a really tough history. And I saw someone come in to draw blood, and she was really giving this girl a hard time about drawing blood. And the professional was very upset and couldn't believe how she couldn't let her do this. And it was this exchange that was heartbreaking to watch because it was two people with their pain on the outside of their bodies just clashing. Okay. And it highlights so well that we need to understand that people have gone through a lot before we get to them.
Yes.
We can't assume what that is just because someone has a history that may look really challenging. That does not give us the whole story. We
Mhm.
do not see the whole story. We have not lived that life. And we are in no way, this is not our job to be in judgment of whatever someone may have gone through. That's an important piece of all of this, I think. And so as we take care of ourselves a bit more, take a few deep breaths before we go in, as we try to make sure we're hydrated. This is what you'll hear in episode 3. Make sure that you're eating, that you're resting when you can, that you're going outside and getting sunlight. This is how we can show up and be really compassionate and be really curious and calm in the middle of a storm. So, Kate, I am so grateful for this conversation. I know that I'm looking forward to using what we've learned even deeper in my work. And is there anything else that you would leave us with?
Focus on taking care of ourselves so we can take care of other people is so key, and to not let caregiving, whether professionally or personally, become our entire identity any more than we want our loved ones being sick or passing away being their entire identities.
Yeah, absolutely. Kate, if people want to find more about you, I know they can find some really helpful stuff on your Instagram account, and it's under liminal resilience. And I
Yes.
love that word liminal because that means the space in between. This is exactly what our loved ones are going through when they're in this place of getting a diagnosis and end of life. They are in the in between.
Yes.
And Kate beautifully shares with us through her blog, which is also linked on her Instagram, what it means to be in this place of in between and how we can build resilience there, and how that can be one of the keys to being able to navigate this life in a way that feels really good for whatever your experience is. So that's on Instagram, Liminal Resilience. I will link her blog and Instagram in the show notes, which are located below this episode. If you're using Spotify or Apple, it will also be linked in the blog on hospiceredefined.com. I want to remind you to go to hospiceredefined.com to find all of our episodes and also to download that caregiver checklist, because put it on your refrigerator and just look at it and notice, is there one small thing I can do today to take care of myself? It's okay if you can't do all the things. Maybe one thing today would make a big difference in how you show up for your loved one or your patients. Thank you again, Kate, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Hospice Redefined. We see you, we hear you, and we're so glad that you're a part of this community. Please visit hospiceredefined.com to find our free caregiving guide and to keep updated on all of the latest podcast episodes. If you know someone who's interested in hospice, or maybe they're curious, or maybe there's someone who needs it for their family, please share this episode with them. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you on the next episode.